Hi guys, welcome along to this tutorial on scriptable events. Today we're just going to continue on from where we left off the last day. And first off, we'll just have a quick recap of what we achieved in the last episode. So if we just press play, we'll see what we have. So as we progress through the scene, we reach our checkpoint. It enables the next section. We travel on. Reach the next section, and this is where we left off. So what we're going to do in this episode is, as we travel through our scene and we reach the next point, we're going to get rid of the previous section of the scene. And how we're going to do that is timed responses. So how the events worked up until now is we create an event, we triggered it with our zone. Once it's triggered or invoked, our listener who is listening out for that particular event, it's going to carry out a set of instructions. Now, wouldn't it be good if we could kind of space these calls out? So for instance, this rock might fall on 0 seconds and 5 seconds later something else happen, and we can essentially create a sequence. So that's what we're going to do today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and create our first event, and we're going to call it, let's just go up to our asset menu, create a standard event, and we're going to call it a trigger zone. We're going to call this no return point 1, and we're going to add a trigger zone into the scene which we created in the previous tutorials. We'll just add there, and as we step onto the new section, we're going to do some stuff. So with the trigger zone, we need to populate the field here with our no return point. We want this to delete on trigger enter. So we have our invocation, or our invoking class. We have our event. So now let's go ahead and add the scene listener. We're going to call it a no return what did we call it, point. And we're going to give that a standard listener. Just bring it down here. Okay, so first we'll just populate the field with our event. So this is what we've been using up until now. So if we just come up to the event options, we use timed event responses, and we'll just start adding them in, populating them. So what do we want to happen first? First thing we'll do is, before we actually get that far, we'll go ahead and just set up these rocks and stuff. So on rock number 1, we want to make sure that it's not static. Yes, and we'll add a rigid body. Set this to use gravity and kinematic. Then we'll go to our bridge, just make sure it's not static. Add a rigid body, use gravity is kinematic. So this is our first part. So let's go back to our listener. So up until now we've been using the standard responses, but right now we want to create a sort of a sequence of events, a sequence of responses. So let's go ahead and use our timed responses functionality. So we'll just close up this. Up here, use our timed responses. Let's create an event. So let's create one. We'll call this rock fall 1. We'll just do 1. Rockfall 1. We'll do this at 0 seconds. So once it's invoked, this will happen. Our set of instructions. So what instruction do we want? Well, we'll grab our rock. We'll access the rigid body we just added. Find the kinematic method and set it to false. So it's set to true at the moment, which means the rock won't fall. So when we set that to false, it is going to fall. So let's create another timed response, and we'll call this bridge fall. On this bridge fall one. Same thing, let's go grab the bridge, find the rigid body, access the isKinematic method, set it to false, and we're going to do this after 1 second. So this effect is going to essentially drop the rocks first and then the bridge. And we create another one then, and we'll say save all. So then what we want to do is, you don't want them to just keep falling forever, so after a set amount of seconds we'll just delete them or disable them. We'll go ahead and delete them actually. And we say 7 seconds. We don't need to access that, so we'll go ahead and we'll just create a quick script just to give us the functionality to delete something. So we'll call this delete game object. Open this up. Yep, so we remove all of this, we don't need to use any of this, so I'm just going to create a public method, void read obj. That will do, and then we'll call this pass in a game object j. Thanks, just waiting to compile. We'll go ahead and destroy. What will we destroy? The obj by passing in. And that is that. Just leave that compiles. We'll go ahead and create an empty game object, and we call it destroy obj. We'll go ahead and drop in our script we just created, so that's okay. If we go back to our event listener, let's add a event response into this delete all event, and we'll grab our obj delete, come down to find the component, come down, and there's our method delete obj. What do we want to delete? Well, we'll delete the rock cluster. So just a quick recap. First the rock will fall, 1 second later the bridge is going to fall. After 7 seconds we're going to delete them from the scene when they're out of sight. So just go ahead and save this, hit play, and hopefully all should work. Let's travel through. So first checkpoint reached. Let's go to the point of no return. There we go. So we've got a slight error here with this rigid body, so we just set that to set the mesh colliders to convex. Yep. So we'll just have a quick play there again. So as you can see, when it should all work perfectly. Yep, everything's working. Now, one small thing is when you're going through all this and you're creating gameplay and so on, it can become very laborious when you're pressing play, you're playing through, you're seeing if it works, you're going back, doing it again, adding something else, testing, and you spend a lot of your time actually doing this sort of iterative approach to testing. So what we have on the event to help us out with this, you know, if we were to come up here, so we've triggered this part. So we actually come to this event, the event listener, find the event. Here's our event. can actually trigger this from here. So we go ahead and, just for testing purposes, without having to actually physically pass through our trigger zone, we can just invoke it from the event itself, and it should give us the functionality that we were looking for. You can also do this from the event listener itself. So we can actually trigger all these. So we come up to the scene view. What we would do is we travel up here, but you know, we don't really want to do that. We just want to do it the fast way, just to check it out, because we know our collisions are working. So there's our next bit. Checkpoint 2, or checkpoint no return. Let's show the debug. There we go. And if we did reach checkpoint 2, and so on. So this just saves us time to quickly test before we play through. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the second part. So just recreate. So we know the drill by now. Let's right click, create our event. Scriptable asset. We want a standard event, which is here. We're going to just copy and paste this to make it easier. And we're just going to call it number point turn 2. So we have our event. Let's add our evoking class, which is our trigger point. Grab our zone. Give this actually, we name this to, we call it point 2. We'll give the first one a name as well. That was point 1. Drag it down. Okay, so go on to our trigger point 2. Drag in our event. There we go. We have our invoke class. We have our event. Now we need our listener. So let's create one. No. Return point 2, standard event, listener. Let's drag it down. Let's basically recreate what we did in the first one. So we populate our event field, move on to responses, call this rock fall 2. We'll do this at 0 seconds. What are we going to do? We're going to grab our second rock. Getting that rigid body to this. Set it to kinematic. Do the same with our bridge. Add rigid body. Kinematic. Yep, that's all perfect. So we grab our rigid body component. Access the isKinematic method and set it to false, which will make a fall. Let's add a new one. We're going to call this bridge fall. You don't even have to give it a name, but it's just to help you organize stuff. We'll do after 1 second, I believe. Let's access. And we did the rock, then we do the bridge. Access the rigid body component, access the isKinematic method, set it to false. And finally, we're going to delete after 7 seconds. Say, I think we've done 7 seconds. Grab the second rock in here. Sorry, we actually grab our delete component. Delete game object. Delete game object. Which object we want to delete? The rock cluster 2. We also want to delete our bridge. So we cannot return. We grab our delete. Delete. And delete obj, and what are we going to delete? The bridge. Okay. Well, quick recap: we have our sequence set up for checkpoint 1. We have our sequence set up for checkpoint 2. we're going to drop the rock, drop the bridge, and then delete the objects. So if we go ahead and play this, it should drop. Yep, cannot return. Let's go to the next section. And as we we've had the wrong rock in here, so it seems. So what have we got? Rock cluster 1, body is kinematic, bridge, rock cluster bridge is kinematic, false. Should be rock cluster 2. Something must be static on this, I suspect. Set it all, turn it all off. So let's test that out again. So let's test this out. As we come through. And next one. There we go. As we can see, everything is working as expected, and we can no longer return. And that's it for this tutorial. Please stay tuned for the next video where we'll go through how we can pass and receive our data through events. So please thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you.